Welcome to another episode of The Gray Area. You can find me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Kevin Gray Sports. And make sure you go to patreon.com/Kevin Gray Sports to get exclusive sports content, including our interviews and everything that we do here on Patreon. And today I am joined by, I want to say, a kindred spirit in a lot of ways, because I'm from Kansas City. This is Kel Dansby, one half of the Corner Podcast, ESPN Ringside. You've seen his work all over the place. Kel also from the Kansas City area, knows the Kansas City area very, very well. And as a wrestling fan, just like me, so whenever we have conversations and talk, whether it be about MMA or boxing, somehow the conversation always gets to wrestling. And Kel, we always wind up just talking wrestling for, however much longer that we do, right?
Always. Yeah, no, it's great. Like you said, I know the Kansas City area well, even though, growing up in New York and everything else, I went to high school in Vegas, but my children's mom is from Kansas City. My kids live in Kansas City to this day. So when I lived there for like 3 years. I lived in Lenexa, Kansas, because I was like fake uppity. So I wanted to live but no, yeah, like I got into journalism. I really have to credit Johnson County Community College. So shout out to everyone in Overland Park. But yeah, no, I went there, and like my journey and everything really started there, and it catapulted me to now being at ESPN. So I owe a lot to Kansas City and the Kansas City area, and best barbecue in the world. So
That's right. That's right. I'll have to make sure folks hear that, because that's exactly right. Talk about growing up in New York. Obviously, where your journey started, obviously growing up in New York, to what that area did for you and how it shaped you into the man that you've become, not just outside of your profession, but how it has shaped you and molded you to become the person that you are today.
I mean, it's cliche, right? But they say if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. And that's very true about growing up in New York. Whether you're there, your whole life or a limited amount of time, whether you're a grown person when you move there, it's just something about the city that really changes you, changes your mindset, and it sticks with you forever, no matter where you go in and out. I was lucky enough to be born there. I was born at a time where hip hop was really starting to become what it would be. So I was born in '88, but my uncle, my father, my godfather, they were all, teenagers, early 20s, and into the whole hip hop scene. So they grew with it. I talk about it on my podcast, but a lot of people miss these things. My dad went to Mount St. Michael's. I went there for a brief time before I moved to Vegas. But my dad went to Mount St. Michael High School, and my godfather was best friends with him. They went there. My godfather's other best friend at Mount St. Michael, all in the same grade, was Puff. So it was like Puff Daddy and my godfather. It was weird. My godfather got married, and my dad and Puff Daddy were the two best men. But yeah, but they all grew up, like went to Mount St. Michael's in Mount Vernon, and then you fast forward to my uncle decided he went to the Fashion Institute downtown Manhattan, but he decided to stop doing fashion, which at like 19, he was doing fashion for Busta Rhymes and Leaders of the New School and Tribe Called Quest. So he was making all like the crazy hats and like Afrocentric gear. He decided to not just do fashion, but he wanted to go into like different avenues of music. So he started by doing promotions. He was part of the Uptown Records promotional crew. So I got to hang around there. My godfather at the time was an A&R for Uptown. So kind of hooked up my uncle with that gig. I was around the office. I was like 3 years old. I tell the story all the time. I played a spirited game of tag with Heavy D in the Uptown offices. And that big man is fleet of foot. So, but seeing that, and then like Mary J. Blige in the office, and you get all of these things, and then Puff breaking off, and my uncle went and became head of promotions at Bad Boy. So then I got to experience the rise of Bad Boy and everything. I remember like just being on my block, and like Mace would come through and just chill he got a crazy jump shot. He hit me with the nastiest crossover I've had in my life. My ankles are still somewhere in Harlem. But like, so these people were very like touchable. They were very real. I grew up around all of these people. To this day, I know like a lot of those people. My uncle then went on to be, head of promotions and like some VP at head of promotion at Rough Riders, a VP at like D-Block with like the Locks and everything. And then my godfather has been at multiple different places. So I've grown up with all of this accessible. I used to go back, even when I moved to Vegas for high school, go back over the summers. My summers were spent in the studio. Like I would be up until 5 a.m., me and my best friend would just chill with us and take us to the studio from 11 p.m. to like 5 a.m. And I heard some of the best songs being recorded. You think from like 99 to 2004, 2005 in hip hop, I was around for a lot of that. So it was crazy running in and out of office buildings and executive stuff. I was a runner mostly, but I didn't care. Like I remember I used to have to transcribe the lyrics. So they'd give the promotional UCD of an album. I'd have to transcribe the lyrics, and those would go into the booklets when they still had CD booklets. So I used to be like that kid where they just drop off the thing and I'd have to get lyrics and listen back a million times. So so all of that was just normal to me. So I've never known anything besides that. I never had a concept of something was impossible, especially when it comes to entertainment or doing something like all of that was very attainable. I didn't want to go into music. I was never like super musically inclined. I don't know. I got like a mixtape out there somewhere. Me and my best friend cut one when I was like 15. But outside of that, like we quickly realized we weren't good rappers. So, but no, we knew that we wanted to do something different with our lives. And then I was always good at football. I went, played football, played college football. But when I decided to stop doing that, it was just kind of natural, like to get into an entertainment field. And a lot of that is due to growing up in New York and just knowing that all of that is so easily attainable, which I guess the statistics say it isn't. But for me, that's all I saw growing up. Yeah. So I thought, getting into one of these places with world-renowned people or doing something like that, how hard can it be? I see people do this every day. So when I decided to do sports journalism, I was like, no, I could do that. And it seemed weird to everyone else, but to me, I was like, no, I can do that as a career. Why not? So I never had the idea that I couldn't do it. And all of that is attributed to New York. You can drop into New York tomorrow and be like, I want to be a Broadway actor. And you're like, what? And you'd be from like Iowa. But if you stay there long enough, 2 years later, you're like, oh, look at this. I'm a Broadway actor. Yeah. So it's one of those things. Like in that city, LA is kind of similar too. But in that city, when you're there, you just feel it. And it gives you this air of like invincibility. Anything is possible.
So truly, look, the show out there, Growing Up Hip Hop, you truly grew up hip hop in New York. And not only did you experience the growings up in New York, but the hip hop and what it helped shape and become as far as a desire and a passion for your career was concerned, seeing those examples out there for you. And talk about that journey from obviously growing up and being around very successful individuals, seeing the work ethic that it took to become those individuals and how that shaped you and molded you to have a desire for sports journalism and the unique path that you took with respect to being and getting to Las Vegas eventually and how that came about.
Definitely. It's so hard to cram like those. I'd say it was like 3 years, but those were the longest 3 years of my life. And not like in a bad way necessarily. It just seems like from when I was 21 through 24, my entire life changed. So at 21, I had my children already. So I was with their mother when I was 16 in high school. We had my oldest daughter at 17, my middle daughter at 19, my son was at 21, and that was it. So those are my 3 kids. We had those by 21. And I decided to stop going to school for nursing. I had stopped playing college football at that time. You can imagine with 3 kids, it becomes a little crazy. Yeah. But I just kind of like, college football is a full-time job for like people who haven't played collegiate sports. It doesn't leave much time for anything else. So school was getting harder. Being a parent was getting harder. They try to help these things. Like my scholarship, I had built in daycare and all this. So there was stuff like that. But even then, it was just like, I'm at the point where I can't give football my all. And you can't, like they say, you can't play boxing. You can't play college football.
Right.
Like, people are there like to get their parents out the hood, or like to feed their families, or they grew up on farms all their life. And yo, listen, I'm here to get to the league, or I'm going to a coal mine. Like, I'm not here to play around.
Right.
So
right.
I couldn't half step it. So I decided to not play football anymore. I ended up doing like nothing. Like, I took a paternity leave before that was cool. I ended up doing nothing for like 6 months, 7 months before my son was born, and then up until he was born. But then it was like, okay, I don't have a job in Vegas at this time. And I was like, we need help with the kids. So she was like, what do you think about going to Kansas City? Your whole family's there. She was like, we'd have help. I was like, all right, cool. So we go to Kansas City. I decide, okay, I'm going back to school because I have all these credits. I'm 21. I'm supposed to be in college. Yeah. And I felt like I was behind the 8 ball. So I went to the school, and I didn't really want to do nursing anymore, but I had a ton of credits, like, applied to that. So I was seeing what else I could do without having to take a million undergrad courses again. And I was waiting, and I was about to see the counselor. I was just chilling. Like, I was 2 people away, and they had TVs in Johnson County Community College on the wall. And Colin Cowherd was on ESPN, and I loved Cowherd at the time. And his radio show was there. It must have been ESPN 2. And I was watching, and I was like, I think I can do that as a career. And then I was like, wait, he gets paid for this. I was like, there's a lot of other people on this network that get paid. I was like, so it's a real job. I was like, you know what? I'm going to do that. That's what I'm going to do. And not only that, I'm going to work at ESPN. It's not I want to be in sports media. I want to work at ESPN. I want to work there and do that specifically. So I went into the counselor's office, said, hey, I want to do journalism. They're like, yeah, that's a lot more English classes. Mm-hmm. They're like, you do communications. It's like, sold. So they signed me up for communications to be my major. There was a radio station there and a school newspaper, both tremendous. Like, I've been to a lot of universities now and been around a lot of universities. Johnson County Community College has, I'd say, one of the best programs I've seen, regardless of stature of school. I've been around UNLV a lot, like bouncing back and forth from Vegas. Yeah. They blow UNLV out of the water in terms of communication. Yeah, so their radio station was on AM radio, which was great because you kind of it helped us get a lot of guests we really shouldn't as a college station, because it was no different than a normal sports station. At the time, they didn't have a sports show. I asked them, could I do one? They had a slot open from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. And I was like, I'll take it. So I'd have to take my kids to like daycare super early, get to the school, do that, go to my classes, pick the kids up. It was crazy. So I did that, and that show led to me getting an internship at 610 Sports Radio, which really, in terms of professional career, I'd say that started my professional career. I have been lucky, but I guess, I don't know, a lot of times I say I create my own luck, but you just can't deny certain steps in your life where you just get lucky. So that was one where I got lucky. So my internship had to be approved. It was approved by Nick Wright, who's now at Fox Sports. He was the number 1 guy there at the time. I was 21, he was 23.
Wow.
So, or Nick Wright was 24. He was 24, 2 years removed from Syracuse, ended up being the biggest guy in Kansas City sports radio in 2 years. And he had I forgot what show was on 810, but the show on 810, the guy had been on like 20 years. He's since been fired. He said something like Me Too-ish, and they got him the fuck out of there. Yeah. But Nick Wright had beat him in the ratings. So Nick signed off on me. The year and a half before me, he signed off on one of my good friends, Carrington Harrison. Yeah. Who still does.
Mutual friend, that's right.
Drive. Yeah, on 610. So Carrington was his intern before me. So it was crazy. So Nick then left for Houston 2 weeks after I started my internship. He had signed me. I was like, oh, what am I going to do? And I met Carrington, Harrison, and my boy Danny Parkins. They had the midday show, and they're like, come be our intern. I was their intern for the summer months. And then they were like, yo, you're so, like, let's do it. And they hired me to be their producer for the next 6 months. So I was hired full-time to be their producer, and I've learned more in those 6, 8 months than I've learned in any school in my life. So
Did you feel like
prepared?
Go ahead. Did you feel like you were on your way? Like once you got that position as producer, did you feel like, all right, like the rocket ship is off and running, and like this is where I'm headed?
No, I was extremely aware how behind the ball I was.
Okay.
So that was motivational, but I didn't think I was getting anywhere. I thought I was behind because, again, Nick Wright was 24. He hired me. I was 21. Denny Parkins was 23. Really good friends with Nick Wright. Both went to Syracuse journalism. Denny Parkins now has like ESPN radio show in Chicago, his hometown. He's amazing. So Danny was 2 years older than me, just left Syracuse, just in prime position for him to take over Nick's spot in afternoon drive. Carrington is 1 year older than me. He was 22. So he was already on radio and people knew C-Dot. And he had been doing radio, and like you could tell his character was just crazy. And he had his voice and he had everything. And I was producer for them, but I was on air at the school at Johnson County. Mm-hmm. So I was like, oh, I'm behind. I'm a year behind them, but they're on air over the whole city. So whenever I could chime in as a producer on air, I would do so. Or I started doing Royals games at night as a board op, which was amazing. Rob Ford, shout out to Rob. He's the voice of the Houston Astros now. But before then, Robert Ford used to do Kansas City games at night. And I used to be his board op. And the way that it worked, his game would end at like 12:15, and he'd have to leave the stadium. But we were on air until 12:30, 12:45. So he'd be like, hey, take it. Like you can have the last 30 minutes, answer calls, talk about the Royals. They sucked. It was right before they went on a run to back-to-back World Series. But he was like, hey, have the last 30 minutes. And Robert Ford, he's from the Bronx, New Yorican like me, everything. Like Robert Ford is incredible. I'm glad he got his dream job. Deserves it. But again, one of those lucky things where someone was so talented, he gave me an opportunity. So I really crafted my voice. I learned how to answer phones. I knew how radio worked. And then another big break was in Danny and Carrington's show, they would do a random like 10 minutes. It was from 47 to 56 at the end of the second hour, where they wouldn't talk sports. It'd be sports adjacent. So they would have to look up like hot topics in sports that aren't really, really sports. So Carrington used to have me search stuff on Black Sports Online because it was sports adjacent for like the hottest topics. And they talk like the funny stuff of what's happening. So I followed Black Sports Online on Twitter so I could look at this faster and see what they had so I could put it in the show rundown. So it ended up that they, towards the end, it was probably November of that year. So I got hired on in the summer. I did 6 months at 610. And then 610, it was like, cool. Denny and Carrington were getting bumped up to the main slot. I could stay there and be their board guy. That would have been fine. But at that time, my marriage was crumbling. So my marriage was effectively over. I mean, I had a girlfriend already. It was all bad. Nasty situation. My wife had a work husband. It was just crazy. I talk about it on my show all the time. She worked at a call center. Don't mess with people in a call center. Anyway.
That's funny because I met my wife at a call center.
Oh, okay. Congratulations.
Yeah.
But again, this is what happens when two people are at a call center. Right. You guys met there, so you're safe. When one person's at a call center and the other person is not, still gets a little crazy. So, that was going downhill fast. So I remember BSO posted, and it was like late November. They're like, oh, we're looking for a writer. And I was like, man, I want to get back to writing because I watched a lot. Around the Horn was one of my goals of being on. ESPN, and they were all writers at that time, newspaper writers, pretty much exclusively. So I was like, I love radio and I want to keep doing radio, but to get to a national platform, you have to be a writer. And the only reason I wasn't is because journalism took too many classes. So I was just like, okay, I have to become a better writer. And I had an internship the year prior with SNY in New York and covered the Giants run when they went to the Super Bowl. So I was like, I've written before. Let me get back to being a writer. And reached out to Robert Littell at Black Sports Online. He was looking for someone on the West Coast. He was already in St. Louis at that time. He was stationed in St. Louis, didn't really need another person in the Midwest. So he was like, yo, I like your stuff for SNY. Very qualified. Like, I like your voice and all this stuff, but I don't need someone in the Midwest. I need someone on the West Coast. He was like, if I get something else, I'll let you know. I was like, all right, man, thanks. Like, thanks for the shout out. A week later was Thanksgiving. We had Thanksgiving at my crib in Lenexa. The day after Thanksgiving, my wife flips on me because something at that time, I don't know, she decided to blow up on me because she knew I had a girlfriend for like ever, but I guess she was ignoring it. So she decided to like flip that, yes, I'm a married man with a girlfriend. Like we were pretty much a rat. I don't even know if we were sleeping in the same room at this point. But she decided to flip that I had a girlfriend, put all my stuff outside and said, this is it, you got to get out. I was like, all right, cool. Like, I was like, let me just pack my bag. She put my clothes and everything like in this big duffel outside. Yeah. So I was like, cool, I had clothes. Like I didn't care. I didn't wear much anyway. I was like, whatever's left here, like have it. But I made sure in my book bag, I put my laptop so I could write and my Xbox because I won't go anywhere without my Xbox. And that was it. Put that on my back, called up a friend I had in Kansas City area. I had called the girl who was my girlfriend at that time briefly because that also went downhill quick. But I called her and she was like, listen, I'll fly you out to Vegas like the next day because she was in Vegas. She was like, you want to come out here? I'll fly you out. My best friend was living in Vegas. I was like, let's do it. She bought me a ticket, flew back out to Vegas. On waiting in the airport to get there, I emailed Rob and I'm like, hey, I'm gonna be on the West Coast. I'll be in Vegas.
Like, hey, I'm coming, by the way.
Yeah, I was like, I'm gonna be in Vegas, not LA, but if you need a West Coast rider, I can always like drive to LA. Or I'll take the quick trip, like if we need to do something in LA, but I'll be in Vegas. He was like, all right, let's do it. He was like, I got a fight next week. Can you cover it? I was like, yeah. I was like, yeah, sure, no problem. And
like, I got nothing else better to do right now.
Yeah. And that was my first fight ever. I'd never thought about covering boxing. I'd only done football previous to that. But I've always been a boxing fan and, pro wrestling fan and everything. And that fight was Marquez Pacquiao 4. So where Pacquiao gets flattened.
Yeah.
So that was my first fight ever covering 6 days into working for BSO after I got to Vegas. And at that time, I'm now 22. I'm probably one of 2 people in the media room under 30 at that time. Definitely maybe the only one under 25.
Yeah.
And I had to like fake the funk. So it was crazy. It was like getting thrown into the fire and, producing the article right afterwards and trying to navigate and get quotes. And it was different, but it was fun, but it all worked out for a reason. Would have never happened to me, if my marriage didn't go the way it did or, all of that stuff. So everything broke. Even my worst of worst moments broke positively for me. It put me where I needed to be on the track where I wanted to go. So that's how I got back to Vegas. Yeah. So I had a girlfriend. I had all these nice people in media, but yeah, I had a girlfriend. It was shunned upon by my wife and I was kicked out of the house. So that is how I ended back up in Las Vegas at that time. And man, it was rough. I mean, I stayed in my best friend's walk-in closet because he had a loft, but the whole bottom floor was his photography studio. He was a photographer. So I couldn't sleep on the bottom. Like people come in and out, like, take photos and all that stuff. Upstairs in the loft, he just had his bed, the bathroom, and a walk-in closet. So I had my, went to Walmart, bought 2 pillows, a blanket, and slept on the floor of his walk-in closet. And then I didn't want to always be like up under him because as a photographer, you work from home a lot. So I want to give him his space. So I would go during the day, walk over to Starbucks, sit down, write articles for BSO all day, 9-10 hours. I just did that continuously. Those days I didn't have food to eat, like didn't have money. Because when I left, I wanted to make sure my kids were good and everything was going there. I ain't taking up from my bank account. Like in the marriage, you have a joint bank account. Like you said, have it. Any money in there, have it. I'm good. I'll figure it out. And I did. I mean, there's a lot of weird stuff on the path. Like I never stopped working. No matter what happened, I never stopped working. Like me and my ex-wife would beef for years after that. Because at points, especially as a journalist, you're writing for free or you're writing for a little bit of money. Like I got to live, got to eat. So, you got to do different stuff. She's saying I'm not sending the kids enough money. I remember to kind of circumvent that, I went and I applied for not WIC, but whatever, like an EBT card, or I don't know what it is. Like just a food card, like the food stamp, but it was like card.
Yeah.
I applied for that and they gave me that and insurance because I was still technically a student. You got to be 2 years removed to not be a student. So they gave me that. And with 3 kids, I remember I was getting $660 a month in food, card money, and insurance for me and the kids. So as a journalist, I never had to worry about insurance. Usually that's like a problem. Like,
right.
So I remember calling my ex-wife and be like, listen, I don't got money to send for the kids. Like I don't. But here goes this card. There's $660 on it every month. You don't got to worry about feeding them. I was like, I could give you this in cash and it'd be the same. She didn't see it that way, but this is how I justified it in my head. I was like, here's $660. Like, and she'd call me like a deadbeat dad and all this stuff. Like, no, every summer the kids would come with me. I would figure it out, make sure we were good. Every winter, Christmas break, they would have their Christmas gifts, all this stuff. It's like, I can't pay monthly money for the kids, but here goes $660 every month for food. That's a ton. Yeah. Like, you can feed you, the whole house, like, and I was like, here's $660. I wish someone right now gave me $660 for grocery every month. So yeah, I gave that to her. I was like, you don't have to put the kids on your insurance at work. I was like, that saves you $70 a paycheck, $80 a paycheck without having them on your insurance. So I was like, I'm saving you money here and I'm saving you money in groceries. Let's call it even. She fought me to the death on that, but that's what I could do. So I always did these like little side things to make sure that one, my kids were taken care of, and to then make sure I can pursue my dream. Nothing ever stopped me from working. Worked through my separation. I remember the day that my ex-wife sent me the papers to get divorced. I got the papers in the morning in my email, went, printed them out at Kinko's, signed it, sent them back to her, went to the Starbucks next door, worked, wrote 10 articles that day. And it was like, people like, you should be sad. You just got divorced. I was like, yeah, there's no time to stop. Yeah. Like, I don't have time to be sad. Like, I could be sad all I want, but I got to work. Like, I got to write. No matter what I was doing, I was always writing. And I wrote all the time. And then, getting a podcast, shout out to Andres Hale, a little later, a couple of years later and all this stuff. I always had time for my craft. I always had time for my job because this was always my career. I had to pick up little side jobs here and there. I was a substitute teacher for a while because that's what you could do when you have a bunch of college credits. So I was a substitute teacher, like to get a little money in my pocket, to have a place to live. I got a car, make sure the kids were good. But even outside of that, like, that wasn't my job. Like, that was a job. It was never my career. Even during all that, I would go teach, come back. I would coach too. So I coached high school football. Go teach, coach high school football, come back at night, write 6 articles for BSO so that in the AM, when BSO started rolling out tweets, all my articles could come out.
Yeah.
And then on my lunch break, I would go to my car, not eat at the school, write 2 more articles during the day for BSO. So I was like 8 articles a day for BSO. And those for the bros that had multiple swipes weren't easy. Yeah. So, like, it was a lot of writing and collecting and just structuring it on the website and making sure everything was good. And people were none the wiser. That was always the best part. Like, I've had my struggles, I had my everything, never asked for anything. People weren't aware that I was struggling necessarily, because to me, it was all part of the process. Like, it wasn't a struggle. Like, I was getting more interviews by the day. At this point, I'm credentialed to all MMA fights, all boxing fights. Like a lot of the times the money didn't equal to the work I was putting out, but I knew the money would be there in the end because my resume would be so stacked that no one can compete with me. If I wanted money on the outset, I would have lost if I was just doing it for the money, because there's kids with better degrees, parents with a silver spoon, connections. Like there's plenty of those kids. I look around all the time now and I tell people, like, I'm at ESPN running an account that was created for me to run. And I left school, never finished because of that BSO job, because my marriage was ending. I never went back to college. There's kids who pay $80,000 every year to go to the best journalism programs in this nation to one day, hopefully, get the job that I have at ESPN, or to see that campus, or to get a check signed by Disney. So I had to outwork them by 100-fold. And I still do that to this day. Like, I'm just going to outwork everyone.
Yeah.
And that commitment is really, really what put me in this position today.
That concludes the YouTube portion of my interview with Kel Dansby of ESPN Ringside and the Corner podcast. If you want to see the rest of the interview, please subscribe to Patreon at patreon.com/KevinGraySports. For just $5 a month, you can get my exclusive sports content, videos, and interviews, including the rest of this interview with Kel Dansby. Thank you for joining me on The Gray Area.